It had been a good neighborhood party, so far. I was sitting at a heavy patio table talking with Adam, our host this Friday evening. Brent was quietly listening and staying completely out of our argument. We were currently discussing the finer points of bass fishing. My preference for a plastic worm or a lazy ike was being strongly disputed by Adam. He much preferred a shyster for deep water or a jitterbug for top water. Look, Jim, the bug floats and that means it doesn't get caught up in the weeds and moss just under the surface. The shyster gets down there quick in deeper water and the flash from the whirly gig attracts papa bass like you wouldn't believe. Well, you might be right, Adam. Tell you what, I'll give him a try my next time out. If it works like you say, I'll have you and Abby over for a fish fry. How's that? He nodded in agreement and went into the house to use the bathroom. The argument, though friendly, was pointless. It was easier for me to just agree with him than try to convince him that I had learned to fish from my grandfather. It was good enough for Granddad, and that was good enough for me. I started looking around for Janice, my wife of 5 years. There was a small group further out on the patio and it looked like she was dancing with Carl. Adam's wife, Abby, was there, but I didn't see Beth, Brent's wife. There were 3 or 4 others missing, but they were probably downstairs in the game room. The music switched to a slow number and Carl took Janice in his arms to dance up close and personal, but she excused herself and came over to sit with me. All wore out from dancing? No, I just didn't think you would like for me to dance as close to him as he likes. That bad, huh? Worse. He keeps his lower half up tight against my tummy and likes to keep both hands on my behind. I love dancing that way with you, but I just don't feel comfortable dancing that way with him. Come on, dance with me. I feel like being stimulated tonight. She grabbed my hand and led me to the dance area. We managed to undulate through 4 slow songs and then returned to the table. I guess I did a good job of stimulating her because her deep brown eyes had that "take me home and make love to me" look. Adam wasn't back yet, so we made our excuses to Abby and left. Home was just a short walk away, and when I unlocked the door, she started taking her clothes off. She left a trail of discarded items all of the way to the foot of the bed. We did just what her eyes suggested. We made love for 3 hours. Slow, sensuous love. Each of us was doing everything possible to please the other. I woke up to a beautiful sight the next morning. Her head was on my shoulder and my chest was completely covered with shiny raven black hair. The room was still permeated with the aroma of last night's activities. She was lying there, all funky looking. To me she was absolutely, unequivocally beautiful. My thoughts were rudely interrupted by the cutting sound of the phone. The damn thing sounded like a cricket on steroids. I managed to get it off its cradle on the 3rd chirp and mumbled, "Hello?" I couldn't hear a thing. No one answered me back. Thinking it must have been a wrong number, I started to hang it up when I noticed I was holding it backwards. I had been speaking into the end that was supposed to be at my ear. I reversed the damn thing and tried again. "Hello? Hey, Jim, this is Adam. How's it going this morning?" "Not too bad, I guess. I'll know more when I'm fully awake." "What ya need, Adam?" "I just called the marina and the manager said the base are so hungry that they're jumping into the boat to get at the lures. How about I pick you up in a little bit and we give it a try? You can give me lessons on how to fish with a lazy ike, and then I'm gonna stomp all over you with my shysters." "Okay." I laughed. "Better make it at least an hour though. It'll take me that long to make coffee and get my stuff ready." "Great. See you in an hour." The distinct click in my left ear told me the conversation was over. I needed to get up and get busy if I was going to be ready when he got here. The soft tongue caressing my right ear was sending an entirely different message. Janice was awake and she obviously had her own ideas about how this Saturday morning should be spent. I almost reached for the phone to cancel the fishing trip but was stopped by the invasion of a tongue in my mouth. I thought I was completely worn out from our antics last night, but her hand sliding down my body and grasping the excitement between my legs gave the lie to that thought. She would occasionally wake up like this and it was something I looked forward to. I knew I was in for a ride, and a wild ride it would be. All I had to do was lay there and enjoy. I loved it when we made love like this, although lust might be a better term to use. I didn't think she would maintain this slow pace for long, and I was right. Her movements slightly increased in speed and the dreamlike expression changed to one of deep concentration. Her eyes snapped open, staring up at the ceiling. I was barely able to match her movements. I wasn't quite ready yet, and that was a good thing because I knew the ride had only began. We went limp at the same time, neither of us able to move. Both of us were drenched with sweat and gasping for air. A glance at the clock revealed that my hour of preparation had diminished to 20 minutes. I jumped from the bed and dashed to the shower. Strike that. I slid out from under Janice, struggled to an almost upright position and staggered to the shower, banging into the doorframe only once. The shower was short and it only took a couple of minutes to climb into my fishing grubs. Somehow, Janice had made it to the kitchen and had a cup of instant coffee ready for me. I found my fish pole and tackle box in the garage and was walking toward the end of the drive when Adam and Brent stopped in front of the house. Janice came running down the drive and handed me a small cooler with a 6-pack of Coke and a blue ice can cooler inside. She added a quick kiss to my cheek and we were off to the lake. I generally like to give praise when praise is due. Adam had a first-class bass boat. There was more than ample room for the three of us. He was up at the nose where he could run the small trolling motor. Brent was on a post seat by the console and I was on the rear deck. We had been fishing for over 3 hours and so far, Adam had 2 keepers, Brent was still trying to figure it out, and I had 5 keepers. It was obvious to me that Brent wasn't a fisherman. He was a likable guy and he was a lot of fun to be around, he just didn't have a clue about how to catch a fish. We had talked about almost everything 3 guys could think of, except women. That subject had come up about 10 minutes ago. Adam made a long cast and, intently watching where his lure had splashed down, asked, "So, Jim, ever thought of adding a little variety to your love life?" That was a loaded question if I ever heard one. Should I be honest or should I lie to him? Not wanting to lie, and then have to make up another lie to cover up for the first one, I decided to tell the truth. "Yes, I have." "Really? How does your wife feel about that?" "I don't know. We've never discussed it." Adam was still looking at the spot where his lure had splashed, but he wasn't turning the crank on his reel. Brent was carefully looking at the knot he was trying to tie but his hands weren't moving. His head was tilted slightly as if listening intently. Adam's next question just about knocked me off my seat. "Why don't you talk to her about it? Find out if she would go along with it." Whoa, stop. This conversation was going in a direction I didn't like. It was getting way too personal. I wasn't sure exactly what was up. We were kind of new to this neighborhood and I did want to get along with these guys. It was time for me to ask a question. "Tell me, Adam, just exactly what is it you're leading up to?" "Well, a few of us get together a couple of Saturdays a month and have what you might call an X-rated party. We swim, play strip poker, Brent and I were thinking that you and Janice might like to join our little group." Well, there it was. I now realized I had been woken up early and dragged out here to the lake for the sole purpose of having this little conversation. It sure wasn't because the fish were biting. 7 fish in 3 hours? Right. The only fishing going on here was for something that I didn't think I wanted any part of. It was time to be firm, but tactful. "Thanks for the offer, guys, but Janice and I aren't interested." "But you just said that you've thought about it." "I know, Adam, but let me explain. There have been times when I have seen a beautiful woman walk by and wondered what she would be like, but that's human nature. I would never act on that thought. You're sitting in this boat with a husband that's 100% faithful to his wife." Adam just couldn't let it go at that. He had to push one more time. "But, Jim, if both partners agree to that kind of an arrangement, then being faithful, or unfaithful, has nothing to do with it. Look, guys, I'm not sure I could stand the thought of Janice sleeping with some other man. As for me sleeping with some other woman, that would break her heart. I love her too much to do that to her." The discussion of that subject was over. Adam started reeling in his lure and Brent finished tying his knot. Brent said something about how hot it was getting and that pretty well ended our fishing trip. They dropped me off at my drive about 2 in the afternoon. Janice's car was in the garage but she wasn't home. A note on the fridge informed me that she was shopping with a couple of the girls. Janice didn't get home until after 6. She gave me a peck on the cheek and went straight to the kitchen, telling me that supper would be ready in about an hour. She evidently found the pan of fish I had brought home and cleaned, so I wasn't surprised that the meal was fish and fried potatoes. I was surprised at how quiet and thoughtful looking she was. Normally, I would be forced to relive her shopping trip in all its glorious details. Then I remembered she hadn't brought home a single package. This was highly unusual, to say the least. She was either sick or had something on her mind that she didn't want to talk about. I retreated to my home office/den after supper. I was a structural design engineer, a construction coordinator, and very good at my job. The room had been designed as a large family room, but since we didn't have a family, I had converted it to a workroom. I had a normal-sized writing desk and the latest model computer sitting beside it against one wall, and a very large work table against the other wall. The computer on the work table was custom designed for my work. Janice and I shared the computer by the writing desk. She didn't pay any attention to the one on the work table because the programs on it weren't any good for email or surfing the internet. I finally closed down a CAD program and went to the bedroom. Janice was already there. She was laying on her back, hands behind her head, staring at the ceiling. I knew she had something on her mind, but I wasn't sure what. As an icebreaker, I asked what I thought was a neutral question. "Who were you shopping with today?" "Abby and Beth called not too long after you left and I spent the day with them." That didn't sound good. Could they have had the same conversation with Janice that I had with their husbands today? I noticed you didn't bring any packages home with you. You must not have done much shopping. We didn't. We spent most of the day just talking. Honey, I kinda agreed to something without checking with you first. No, she wouldn't do that, would she? She surely didn't agree to join the parties. Damn, I didn't like the sound of that at all. How could she possibly agree to something like that? Sis called right after you left. Her husband kicked her out and she doesn't have any place to stay. I told her she could stay with us until she finds a place of her own. We are to pick her up at the bus depot tomorrow morning. I'm sorry, honey, she's my sister. I just couldn't turn her down. Well, that was a relief. Maybe I should find out what she's talking about and not be jumping to any conclusions. Her sister, Sue, would be an inconvenience, but I could live with it. So, how long is she going to stay this time? I thought that was a fair question. She was with us for over 3 months when her first husband kicked her out. I never did hear why they got a divorce. Now that husband number 2 had given her the boot, I was beginning to think maybe some people just weren't meant to be married. I don't know how long she'll be here. She was crying and I couldn't get any details from her. You're not mad, are you? No, of course not. I'm just thinking she'll kind of put a crimp in our nightly antics is all. I wouldn't want to embarrass her. You mean you don't want to be embarrassed? Don't worry, I'll put her in the far bedroom upstairs. She won't overhear too much up there. It sounded like she had given things a little thought, but what I was really thinking about was our play during breakfast. I was also thinking about the fun we often had when I came home for the noon meal. We took extra long lunch breaks every Tuesday and Thursday. This would last for about 5 minutes. We would both return to work after that. With Sue here, our life would definitely suffer. Hopefully she wouldn't be here for 3 months this time. She was evidently thinking along the same lines as me because she smiled and said, "Don't worry, honey, I'll rent us a room at that fancy hotel next to the convention center. I'm sure I can negotiate a monthly rate with them." Sounds like a plan to me. Now then, tell me about your day with Abby and Beth. Well, they did have a lot to talk about. They told me Adam and Brent were going to talk to you about the same thing. It seems they belong to a club and they were wondering if we would be interested in joining them. What did the boys have to say? They told me that everyone swam nude, played games, and then the girls would have a drawing of some kind to see who their sleeping partner would be for the night. I basically told them I couldn't stand the thought of you sleeping with someone else and I wouldn't do it because I didn't want to break your heart. Oh, honey, that's so sweet. Thank you. Is that all they told you? The girls told me a lot more than that. That's all that was said. They changed the subject when I told them how I felt. Tell me everything the girls told you. Oh, they went into a lot of detail. Sometimes they have a poker night. Everyone starts with the same number of clothes on. When you've run out of clothes, then you have to start doing forfeits. On swim night you draw for your partner and then each couple jumps in and the couple that undresses each other in the fastest time wins some kind of a special treat from the losers. Abby said that the last time Adam was a winner, he had several of the women at the same time. It sounds like they have a lot of fun at it. Can you believe that? Yeah, I can believe that. It's just a lifestyle I've never considered. Tell me, Janice, have I misread you? Is this something you want to do? You seem to be kinda enthused about it. I didn't get an immediate response. She started staring at the ceiling again as if in deep thought. I had lain down beside her and was also staring at the ceiling. I rolled to my right and raised up on my elbow looking at her inquisitively. She shifted her gaze to me, started to speak, hesitated for a few more seconds and then asked, "How would you feel about sharing me with other?" That certainly wasn't the response I had expected. I didn't even take time to think about my answer. Nope, I have no desire to share you with anyone else. How about you? You want to share me with other women? No honey, that's something I wouldn't care to do. Besides, I think joining a group would be a very high-risk thing to do. If something like that were to become common knowledge, it would ruin my career. She was right about that. She worked for the largest bank/investment group in the 6-state area. Her position as vice president in charge of human resources and public relations would be in serious jeopardy if she were to be involved in any kind of scandal. They even featured her in some of their TV and radio commercials. Janice picked Sue up at the bus depot Sunday morning and they were going to spend the day together. I got busy with the lawnmower and was about half done when Adam pulled into the drive on his bicycle. I shut the mower off and waited for him to speak. "Hey, Jim, how's it going this morning?" "I'm having a green day, Adam, a boring green day." "Yeah, I know what you mean. Ironic, ain't it? We fertilize it, water it, and then complain because we have to cut it. Oh well, the nice pretty green lawns keep the girls happy. Here, have a beer, you look like you could use a break." Adam was riding an old-time bicycle. One of those made back in the 50s. Large balloon tires, a large seat that was actually designed to be sat on, and a wire basket fastened to the handlebars. The small cooler in the basket is where the beer came from. We walked over to the shade of a large maple and sat down on an iron bench that Janice had bought at some expensive antique store. We each took a drink and then Adam got straight to the point. "So, Jim, have you and Janice considered my proposal?" "Yes, Adam, we talked it over. We're going to decline your offer. It's a lifestyle we don't care to explore. However, we're flattered you asked us to join your group. Thanks for the offer." "You're welcome. We're very careful about who we invite in. Just out of curiosity, would you mind explaining how it works? I mean, I'm sure you just don't pick a couple at random and ask them if they want to share their spouse with other people." "Well, it's not complicated. Actually, it's pretty simple. We only ask couples that at least some of us have known for several months or longer. We then make an offer for them to join us, and if they accept, we conduct a series of interviews with them. We talk to them separately and together. We are very careful about who we invite into our group. We want a couple that is curious about our lifestyle but has been afraid to try it because of the possibility of disease or other complications." "I don't understand, Adam. If a couple wants to experiment with it, and the possibility of disease is eliminated, what other complications could there be?" Adam didn't answer right away. He took a swig of his beer, gazed off across the neighborhood, sighed, took another drink and then tried to explain. "Jim, there's no big secret or anything like that, but I would rather you didn't repeat anything we've talked about this afternoon, okay?" "Okay, Adam, you have my word. I won't tell any tales out of school." "Thanks, I appreciate that. I'm going to use you and Janice as an example. You moved here about 8 months ago. You don't have any kids. If you did, it wouldn't stop us from asking you, but it would be something else to consider. You have been coming to our Friday night parties since you moved here. You are both very well behaved. You don't drink to excess. You seem to get along well with everyone here. Neither one of you have given any indication that you might be on the make, so to speak. You are both attractive. The clincher is that neither of you has shown any jealousy when your mate was dancing with someone else. Do you now understand why we asked you to join us?" "I think so. If you don't mind my asking, what would have happened if we would have accepted?" "Abby would have talked to Janice and I would have talked with you. The main thing we would want to be 100% sure of is that neither of you were seeing someone else on the side. If one of you were, then the offer would have been withdrawn. And no, if one of you were having an affair, we wouldn't tattle to the other. We would warn the one having the affair about the danger of transmitted diseases though." "Okay, then what?" "Both of you would have to visit a doctor and be tested for STDs. Once that was out of the way, we would sit down with you and explain a list of rules. The first rule is that you must stay within the group. The second rule is that you must attend parties as a couple. One can't stay home with the kids or be on the road. This helps to keep things even for both partners. There's several other rules, but those are the two most important. Sounds to me like you have everything pretty well organized. You ever had to kick anyone out of the group?" "No, we've had 2 couples move away and the male member of one couple was killed in a traffic accident. The widow still comes to our regular parties, but since she no longer has a partner, she doesn't attend the parties. That's another of our rules, no singles allowed." "That's all very interesting, Adam. Thank you for your honesty." "You're welcome, Jim. The main reason I stopped by this morning was to be sure there weren't any hard feelings. We would like for you and Janice to continue coming to our Friday night parties. They are strictly on the up and up, no S allowed." "Well, there is one thing we're upset about. We've got a nice pool and patio, so why can't we have the group here next Friday?" "It's a date, Jim, I'll let everyone know. Tell me, Adam, how many of the Friday group are members of the club?" "Just Brent and Beth. I promise, they will always be on their best behavior." "One last thing, if you don't mind, is there anyone else in the Friday group that you're thinking about asking to join your little club?" "No, you were the only couple we were interested in." "Okay, Adam, we'll see everyone here at 6 sharp. Don't be late." Things have gone downhill for the past couple of weeks. The bank/investment group Janice works for has been entertaining several large investors. If they are successful, it will mean millions to the bank. They've been running her ragged trying to schedule meetings and entertainment. Her days have been hectic and long. Our love life appears to be on hold. What little time we have at home has been taken up by Janice's sister, Sue. She's 10 years older than we are, but being kicked out of her home has her behaving like a homesick child. We know she needs someone to talk with, but we really haven't had the time. She kinda made friends with Abby at last Friday's party. That helps keep her busy during the day, but she's here every night. She sits up till all hours and reads or watches TV. It's been hectic at my work too. We won the structural design and general contract on a very large 1-year project this week. The first thing my boss did was ask me to move there to oversee things. That's 1,000 miles away. I told him no, and the good thing is I have the seniority to turn it down. He just laughed and said he had to ask me before he forced it on someone else. Our life is about to pick up. Janice wasn't able to rent us a room due to 2 large conventions in town, but her bank keeps a suite permanently rented for visiting investors. We used it during the noon hour last Tuesday. I seem to remember it had a small living room, a kitchenette, a writing desk, a large bathroom and 2 large bedrooms with king-sized beds. Lust was even better today. Janice was hotter than a firecracker. She seems to think he will sign the papers giving her bank all of his business this afternoon. At a little over $120 million, he will be the 3rd largest private investor at her bank. I had been wearing a smile that wouldn't go away for the 2 hours since I left Janice at 11 o'clock. My secretary came in with the afternoon mail, dropped it on my desk, winked at me with a knowing grin and returned to her office. Ah well, keeping secrets from Maggie, my secretary since I had started working here, was impossible. I didn't even try anymore. I reached into my right-hand pants pocket for my small pocketknife to open the mail with and, it wasn't there. I immediately stood and looked around my chair. I couldn't loose that knife, I just couldn't. It had belonged to my grandfather and it was the only memento of him I had. I was in high school when he died and I still missed him. I had a short panic attack and then remembered it had been in my pocket when Janice removed my pants at the suite. It must have fallen out when I got dressed. I didn't even slow down as I passed Maggie's desk. I just said I would be back in less than an hour and took the stairs 2 at a time on my way out of the building. It was a short, fast trip through traffic to the hotel. I only got honked at twice. I didn't want to take a chance on room service finding that knife and then losing it somewhere in the shuffle. I parked and ran down the hall to the room. Thank goodness Janice had given me a key. I opened the door and there it was lying on the floor right beside the small writing desk. I picked it up and smiled, remembering Granddad. It was at that moment my life changed, forever. One moment it's a nice pleasant sunny day and the next moment it's a dark cold night. Lying on the floor within 3 feet of where I found my knife was a man's silk shirt and a tie. A very expensive looking suit jacket was draped over the back of the couch. Next to the man's jacket was a woman's jacket. There was a silk blouse lying on the coffee table. 2 pairs of shoes, 1 pair male and 1 pair female, were carelessly lying on the floor of the small living room. A pair of trousers and a skirt was on the floor at the beginning of the short hall. A bra, panties and silk shorts led right to the end of the hall where the 3 doors were. I wondered where the silk stockings and garter belt were. I wasn't sure just how expensive the male clothes were, but if I were a betting man, which I'm not, I'd bet they cost more than the average American made in a month. I did know exactly how much the female clothes cost. Sitting in the middle of the small kitchen table was a leather handbag, custom hand-tooled, $900. I knew what the cost of each item was because the credit card statement was lying on the upper right corner of my desk at home. The center door at the end of the hall led into the bathroom. It was wide open. The door on the right went to a bedroom, the one Janice and I had used between 10 and 11 this morning. It was wide open and the room, bed all messed up, was empty. The door on the left was wide open too. That was the bedroom we didn't use this morning between 10 and 11. It was definitely in use now though. Janice was on her back. I now knew where the stockings and garter belt were. She hadn't bothered to take them off. He was holding her by her heels. He pulled out of my wife and told her to get on her hands and knees. It wasn't long before he was shouting about you know what, and she was moaning about doing the same thing. Yep, that was it, and I guess that meant his money, all 120 million of it, would be coming into her bank. I recognized him. His picture, wife and kids included, had been in the paper several times over the last few months. She just lay there with her head on the pillow. That was funny. I always got more of a reaction out of her than that. He collapsed on top of her and they just lay there. I decided it was time to leave. I have no idea why they didn't see me. I had been standing right in the middle of the open doorway for several minutes. I picked her cloth up off the floor and, moving the handbag aside, neatly spread them on the middle of the table. I removed my wedding ring and placed it on the center of her cloth. I remember gently closing the door behind me and walking down the hall. I remember driving, but I'm not sure where I went. At some point, I remember Maggie, faithful Maggie, holding my face in her hands and smiling at me. Bear was there along with Maggie, and they moved me to a dark place. I liked Bear. We had something in common. He owned a bar located in the most dangerous part of the city. We both liked the works of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. We used to spend hours talking about it. Bear was my friend. What were he and Maggie doing together? I was in a dark fog, swimming in a dark fog, trying to get to the light. It was slow, oh so slow. The light eventually got brighter and I could make out black outlines on white paper. No, not paper, a ceiling, a white tile ceiling. The lines were blurry, then in focus, then blurry again. I closed my eyes for a few minutes, at least I think it was a few minutes, and then when I opened my eyes again, the line stayed in focus. Something was pounding on my head. No, something was pounding inside my head. I groaned and a voice beside me said, "Welcome back to the land of the living, boss." I groaned again and turned my head very slightly to the left. "Maggie, what are you doing in my bedroom?" "I'm not in your bedroom, boss. You're in mine." I had to think about that for a minute. Why was I in her bedroom, in her bed? It had to be her bed because it didn't smell like mine. It had a sweeter, feminine smell, like roses. Mine smelled like lilacs. It was more comfortable too. I groaned again, realizing I had another, more immediate problem. "Need help to the bathroom, boss?" I tried to rise up, but the little guy with the big hammer inside my head slammed it against something and I fell back in pain. I swam through the fog again and then Mike, Maggie's husband, was helping me up. Oh, sh. I was in Maggie's bedroom in her bed and her husband would now kill me. I couldn't even defend myself. My arms weren't working for some reason. Mike must have tied me up. I was a dead man. Oh, damn. This couldn't get any worse. I was naked. Bare as the day I was born. It would be worse than death. Pain, lots of pain would be involved. I was sure of it. I was getting sick. My stomach was now being churned by the brother of the little man inside my head. A bowl, a white bowl. Mike sat me on the white bowl. He held tightly to my shoulder with one hand and held a large blue plastic bucket in front of my face with the other hand. I simultaneously exploded at both ends. Damn, but I hurt. I think I would rather Mike beat on me. I doubled over in pain and continued to heave. I woke up in Maggie's bed again. She was sitting in an easy chair, reading a magazine. "Maggie, I'm sorry." "That's quite alright, boss. How do you feel?" "Like hell." "What happened?" "Well, I guess you were in pretty bad shape when you got to Bears. You just staggered behind the bar, got a bottle and killed about half of it in one go. Then you started saying some very unkind things about Janice. They couldn't make too much sense out of what you were saying, and then... Janice. Oh, damn. Damn her to hell." I rolled to my side, curled up and started crying my eyes out. It all came rushing back to me, flooding my mind with words and images of things I couldn't stand, things I didn't want to remember. Things that couldn't happen but they did. Images of her on her back. Him sliding in and out of her. Her moaning over and over. Remembrance of the squishy sound still assaulted my ears as if it were happening right now. The final act. I tried to blank it all out but it wouldn't go away. At some point, Maggie had moved to the edge of the bed and sat there with her hand on my shoulder. Mike came and shook his head in sympathy and left. I eventually cried myself out. I continued to lay there and whimper and that finally stopped. Maggie had been looking into my eyes and I guess she saw and understood. I came to terms with it. My eyes hardened and then focused intently into hers. She watched as I reviewed the situation, weighted the facts and came to a decision. It took all of half a minute. She later told me that chills went up and down her spine during that short span of time. "Maggie, where's my clothes? Filthy and need to go to the cleaners. You and Mike are close enough to the same size. I have jeans and a t-shirt right here waiting on you. You able to dress yourself? You offering to help?" She laughed. "That's the boss I've come to know and love. Thanks for the offer but I draw the line at dressing you. I'll send Mike in if you really need help." "No thanks, Maggie, I'll manage." I did manage, barely. I made it to the kitchen and sat down at the table. Maggie sat a cup of coffee in front of me. She studied me for a minute and then asked, "You feel like you can hold some food on your stomach? I'll try something light, if it's convenient for you. One small bowl of Maggie's very extra special fine homemade beef stew coming up, boss." "Come on, Maggie, considering all that's happened, can't you call me by my name?" "Nope. You're my boss. That means you get called boss, or Mr. Carter. You decide." "Okay, you win. By the way, what time is it?" "Supper time, boss, here's your stew." The stew was good. So was the small glass of milk that went with it. My body won the fight with my stomach. The food stayed down. The guy stirring my insides went away and 3 aspirins placated the little guy with the big hammer in my head. We drifted into the living room and I made myself comfortable in one of the large easy chairs. I let Mike pick first so I wouldn't take his favorite chair. Maggie got comfortable on the couch. "Would one of you guys please tell me how big of an I made of myself yesterday?" "Well, boss, you flew through my office mumbling something about a pocket knife and you said you would be back in less than an hour. You didn't come back that afternoon but I didn't worry about you. I just figured you got tied up with some personal business and forgot to check in with me. Then Janice started calling me about 3. She seemed really desperate to find you. She called about every 15 minutes. I got worried and tried to chase you down. Mike and I got a call about 2:30 this morning from some guy named Bear. He wanted us to come down to his bar and pick you up. He had a heck of a time convincing us to come down there. That part of town is dangerous after dark. You were drunk and totally unconscious. Bear told us you visited several bars before you got to his place. He said you were mumbling something about Janice being nothing but a W for the bank. I guess you had a lot of nasty things to say about her. Anyhow, he helped us load you into the back seat of your car and Mike drove you here. Thanks, guys. I don't know how to thank you. I'm really sorry you got mixed up in my problems. I should have handled things better. What happened anyhow, if you don't mind telling us? I mind, but you need to know. I caught Janice in the middle of having it with another man. She didn't even know I was there. I placed my wedding ring where I was sure she would find it and left. Damn, boss, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I have no idea how someone would be able to deal with something like this. I've already dealt with it, Maggie. Just like that? That quick? How? Well, I got stinking a drunk and I've had a good cry. All that's left now is the aftermath. That shouldn't amount to too much. I don't understand. How can it be over that quick? How can you stop loving someone that easy? I do still love her, but my marriage is over. Look, I have a philosophy of sorts. I've always thought if I were to walk in on something like that and she was being the son of a bee wouldn't leave the room alive. However, if he was there at her invitation, then I would flip him a quarter and tell him to go get a good piece when he was done with her. I forgot about the quarter, but I did remember to leave my wedding ring. I've done all that needs to be done. Mike had sat there long enough without saying anything, but he had to ask, damn, Jim, don't you want revenge? Shouldn't they be made to pay for their betrayal? To what end, Mike? I'm not going to jail just because she decided she doesn't love me anymore. Why should I carry the guilt of harming someone over something as simple as a piece of for the rest of my life? That's all it was, two consenting adults, trying to have a good time. They haven't harmed me physically, so why should I harm them? They'll probably destroy themselves sooner or later anyway. Well, you're certainly being awful cold about it. Maggie, I'm going to go see my boss in a little bit and then I'll get a motel room somewhere. I won't be at work next week. Just pile the important stuff on my desk and I'll deal with it when I get back. You're welcome to stay here if you want. We've got a spare bedroom and you won't be any trouble. Thanks for the offer, Maggie, but I have some things to work out. I think I need to be alone for a while. I got up and left. They tried to convince me to stay, but I wanted to be alone. Maggie said she would take my suit to the cleaners Monday morning and hang it in my office when she picked it up. They were super good people and I wasn't about to impose on them any more than I already had. I spent a little over 2 hours with my boss, at his home. I took him up on the offer to move and supervise the large one-year project he offered me a few weeks ago. When we were done, he told me to see the firm lawyer and then take a month off if I wanted. I went to the firm's lawyer after talking with my boss. Janice and I each had our own checking, savings and 401k accounts. We each contributed to the household account and she could have that. In her position, she made more than I did, so her accounts were larger. All I wanted was what was mine and I made that plain to my lawyer. He made arrangements for someone to pick up my work computer, clothes, and a few personal items. I refused to see Janice. I'm sure she would have had a lot to say. I didn't have anything to say. I had said it all when I returned my wedding ring to her. Did I still love her? Of course I did. One doesn't fall out of love overnight. Would I ever see her again? I hope not. The pain would be more than I could bear. Did I hate her? No. I hated what she did to us. I'm sure she had her reasons, but nothing she could say would change what she had done. I filled the tank on the car and left for the cabin. It was owned by one of my college buddies and he said I could use it anytime I wanted. He claimed the fishing was excellent there and I was going to find out. Everyone has his or her own idea of what paradise should be. This was mine. The large one-room cabin looked down on a small lake. There wasn't even a dock to disturb the beauty. A small rowboat was tied to a tree and the simple wooden bench sitting under the tree was actually a lot more comfortable to sit on than it looked. I know, because I had spent a lot of time on that bench, contemplating my life and options. This would be my last night here. The cabin, though crude, had provided the peace and serenity I needed. A well with an old-fashioned hand pump supplied water. A large propane tank provided for cooking and heating. There was no electricity. 2 old-time coal oil lamps gave off all the light necessary. The bathroom was nothing more than an outhouse, located a good 50 yards behind the cabin. The screened-in front porch looked south across the 300-acre lake. Bathing options were not limited. You could use the large galvanized washtub on the back porch, or you could jump in the lake and wash with the turtles and fish. If you wanted a hot bath, you heated water in a bucket on the stove and then dumped it into the tub. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. A 10-mile trip every other day to the closest town kept 2 large coolers full of ice for milk and meat products. The fishing varied, according to what one liked. Channel cat, bullheads, bass, crappie and sunfish provided hours of entertainment. It was time for me to move on. I had a new life waiting on me 1,000 miles away. Maybe there was something or someone waiting on me there. It had been a long, hard year. Work, eat and sleep. If it weren't for Maggie and Mike, I don't think I could have made it. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Work just went on and on. The first thing I did was to buy a large gooseneck camper and a Dodge, dual-wheel, 4-wheel drive pickup to pull it. I parked it next to the engineering trailer, hooked into the site power supply, and that's where I lived. The second thing I did was to con my boss into convincing Maggie and her husband to join me. Mike had worked in the construction trade all of his life. I talked to the main contractor and had Mike hired on as a crew supervisor. By the end of the first month, he was the shift coordinator for all 3 shifts. The main contractor was damn glad to have him. The busy work schedule was good for me. It wasn't unusual for someone to pound on my door at 2 in the morning because of some difficulty that had come up. I would solve their problem and maybe manage to get back to sleep before the day crew arrived at 8. It kept me from thinking about things that I wanted to forget anyway. I hadn't seen or spoken to Janice since that fateful day in the hotel room, a year ago. She had relentlessly tried to see or talk to me for several months afterward, but I had steadfastly refused. I wanted nothing to do with her or her explanations. Maggie had presented me with several letters from Janice over a period of time, and I had her return them unopened. Maggie decided that all work and no play made Jimmy a dull boy and an irritable boss. She insisted I accompany her and Mike to a nice restaurant every Saturday night, regardless of the workload. She was partly successful. I did manage to meet and date a couple of nice ladies. However, they were looking for a long-term relationship and I was unwilling to commit. I guess I sort of felt like, once burned, twice shy. My boss had another long-term project all lined up. I would take a long vacation, spend a month at the home office to review specifications and then head for the new site. Maggie and Mike were to take a long vacation and then go to the site and start on preliminary work. I would join them as soon as my work at the main office was done. We said goodbye early on a Wednesday morning. I hitched up the trailer, fired the Dodge up and headed for home. Home, that was a joke. There wasn't a home waiting on me anymore. I had instructed my lawyer to give it to Janice. She had a lot more invested in it than I did. I took time to do a little sightseeing along the way and pulled up next to the cabin a week later. It wasn't like I left it. My buddy had managed to get electricity to the cabin and he had installed a small bathroom and a shower. Other than that, everything was the same. Well, not quite. He had installed a large refrigerator. That eliminated the trip to town every other day for ice. He worked for a large corporation and was currently in Europe, doing whatever it is a lawyer involved in mergers and acquisitions does. I had the place all to myself. After 2 weeks, I had endured all the peace and quiet I could stand. The drive from the cabin to the home office wasn't all that much fun. There were too many memories there and not nearly enough water had flowed under the bridge, so to speak, to erase them. I found a small campground not far outside the city, parked the camper and started making my boss happy. I ended up in the bank a few days later. My salary, which was good to start with, had substantially increased. My living expenses had decreased. The project had come in on time and under budget. To make matters better, I was holding a real nice bonus check as a reward for a job well done. I wasn't the only one with a bonus check. The main contractor had given Mike a nice little check and a hell of a good recommendation for his next employer. I made sure my boss made out a nice check for Maggie as well. She more than deserved it. Standing in line, whether in a bank or any other place, is boring. I was gazing around, wishing I were somewhere else, when I saw Janice come around the corner of a hallway. She stopped dead in her tracks, halfway smiled and made a little wave with her hand. I stared at her and didn't wave back. She started to walk toward me and I slowly shook my head. Her face contorted and she turned around and hurried back the way she came. I guess I should have changed banks a year ago. At the time, there just didn't seem to be any need to do it. Seeing her sure ruined my day. I managed to conclude my business and left, contemplating whether I should change banks. It was late on a Friday night and the 10 o'clock news had just finished when I remembered I had a gift to deliver. 5 minutes found the package and 20 minutes later, I was pulling up in front of Bear's Bar. Stepping through the door, I had to stop and orient myself. The large bar that used to sit in front of the door had moved about 10 paces to the left and it was much larger. Everything had increased in size. The dining area had been moved to the far left. Then the bar, then a very large social area and the whole place was much deeper. I was pleased to see that Bear hadn't increased in size. He was large enough already. He was sitting in his usual place at the far end of the bar. The only thing that really stood out was a very beautiful blonde lady sitting in the number 1 booth. A young black man was talking intently with her. I walked up and gave Bear my usual greeting. "Hey, Bear, you been behaving yourself? Well now, Jim, long time, no see. Got a little something for you, big guy." I handed him a small gift that was covered with fancy wrapping, including a bright yellow bow. He delicately removed the wrapping, exposing a small bright red box. Inside was a copy of The Courtship of Miles Standish by Longfellow. It was a small book, measuring 3.75 inches by 5.25 inches, and it was only 5/8 thick. It had to have been printed in the early 1900s. The box, like the book, was in pristine condition. I thought for just a moment Bear was going to get emotional, but he steeled himself and mumbled something to the effect that I shouldn't have. It took a while to get caught up. A lot had happened to the bar and a lot had happened in it. I told him about my job for the past year, and when he asked about my family, I summed it up in one word: divorced. "That's too bad, Jim. Anything I can do to help?" "Nah, it's over and done with. I've accepted that and moved on with my life." "You can tell me that, but your eyes say different. You still love her, don't ya?" "Yes, damn it, I do, but I can't trust her." "Hell, Bear, you know how it is. All the love in the world can't overcome even a moment of mistrust and betrayal. It makes no difference if it was just once, or hundreds of times, the bridge is burned. You can't cross back, Bear, ever." "What about forgiveness, Jim?" "You know," she asks, "you give her another chance and start building again." "Can't do it, Bear, just can't do it." "Can't, or won't?" "Makes no difference, the hurt is too much, the pain goes too deep. I can't get past it." Again, "Jim, can't, or won't?" "I don't know, damn it. I saw her briefly the other day. You know, at a distance. It tore me up inside. I wanted to go over and kiss her, and yet at the same time I wanted to beat the hell out of her. What am I going to do, Bear?" "I don't know, buddy. All I can tell you is to follow your heart. That's where you'll find your answers." The young black guy that had been talking to the blonde in the number 1 booth got up and left. Bear watched him leave, seemed to consider for a moment, and then turned and asked, "Jim, would you do me, and yourself, a favor? You see that blonde lady sitting over there? She's a very good friend of mine. Her name is Gail. Go over, sit down, and tell her your story. All of it. Don't leave nothing out. Start with when you first dated Janice, and don't stop till you get to where you walked in here tonight. If she has any questions, answer M. Okay? Why, Bear? What good will that do? It may not do any good at all. Look, Jim, we've been friends for years. I've never asked you to do anything for me in the past. I'm asking you now, please?" I had to consider for a little bit. Bear seldom asked for anything, but when he did it was usually for a very good reason. Besides, I owed this man. He had done me a few favors back in my wild and glorious youth. "Okay, fine." I finished the last swallow of my now warm beer, walked over to the booth, sat down and said, "Hello, my name is Jim, and Bear says I gotta talk to you." She closed her laptop, flipped to a new page in a large notebook, and looking at me expectantly, replied, "Hello Jim, my name is Gail. Please begin." I began with the first time I saw Janice. I told her everything I could think of. The places we went, things we did, wedding, honeymoon, intimate details I had never told anyone else. Married life, love, trust, future plans and goals. I hadn't even started when a fresh beer appeared as if by magic in front of me. The only time she spoke was to clarify something I had said. I talked for 3 hours. By the time I was done, the table was half covered with empty beer bottles. One of the bouncers came over, helped me to my truck, and drove me back to my camper. He must have had one of his buddies follow us because he was gone the next morning when I woke up. I had a bit of a hangover, but it was tolerable. Things went pretty slow at work for the next few days. We didn't cover a lot of ground, and if we kept this pace, it would be at least 2 months before I could leave for the new site. I got a call from Bear late Friday afternoon, asking if I could stop by the bar later that night. I checked my social calendar and, finding I didn't have one, agreed to have supper with him at 8. Supper. That brought back memories. 1 ate breakfast in the morning, right after you got up. You had dinner along about noon, and supper was the evening meal. Lunch was something you took to school, or work, in a paper sack and ate during the noon hour. If Bear invited you to dinner, you better show up along about noon. If you waited till 6 or 7 that evening, you were just that many hours too late. I found Bear on the dining room side of the bar in his own personal booth. I started to needle him about it when I noticed Mrs. Bear sitting on the other side of the table. That changed things immensely, most notably, my behavior. Bear was large, loaded with muscles, and the way he carried himself made you respect him. Besides, no one wanted him as an enemy. Mrs. Bear, on the other hand, was medium in height, slender, had dark skin that appeared to be as smooth as fine silk and the face of an angel. You could add to that, a musical voice, a heartwarming smile and laughing eyes that danced right into your heart. You respected her because you couldn't make yourself feel any other way. The stunning blonde that Bear made me talk to last weekend soon joined us, accompanied by her husband, Paul. I think her name was Gail. We had a delicious meal of fish and fries, accompanied by a very fine wine. Talk around the table covered many subjects. Bear lost his street dialect and actually talked like the college graduate he was. Normally, he used street talk and the slang of the area so his customers would feel more at ease. It was amusing when he would unconsciously mix proper English in with street talk during the course of a conversation. I learned a little bit about Gail. She was a famous author, and although I don't read much fiction, I had heard of her. She encourages people to tell her their stories and sometimes uses them in her novels. She is always very careful to change names, dates, locations, and anything else that might identify who the real people actually are. Gail and Paul left, as did Mrs. Bear a few minutes later. That left Bear and I sitting there, staring at each other. The waiter came over and whispered something to Bear. "Well, Jim, I have a confession to make. Janice is waiting in privacy booth number 4 to talk with you. I apologize for springing this on you. You don't have to talk, but I would appreciate it if you would at least listen." "Why, Bear?" "Because you need to hear what she has to say." "Do you know what she's going to say?" "No, but Gail does. She managed to have supper with Janice the other night." So, Gail thinks you need to hear what Janice has to say. I trust Gail's opinion. Look, Jim, Gail and Paul were once where you are now. I personally know their story. They managed to get together and work their differences out. They are totally devoted to each other now. I trust Gail's intuition on these things. Look at it this way, what have you got to lose? I didn't say another word to Bear. I just got up, went to the bar and ordered a beer. I knew about the privacy booths. They were large, fully enclosed, sat against the wall, had a curtain that closed across the front, and if you talked in a reasonable tone of voice, no one else would be likely to hear what you were saying. The waiters didn't even bother you. There was a call switch on the wall. If you wanted something, you turned the switch on and someone would show up. The local pimps liked these booths. They were large enough to seat 8. They could go in there with their working girls to settle up after a night on the streets. More than one gang war had been prevented because the leaders, at Bear's insistence, had sat down in one of these booths and worked their problems out. I slipped through the curtain and slid into the right side of the horseshoe-shaped booth. A very good-looking Janice was sitting opposite from me. She certainly didn't look like she was suffering very much. I looked into her eyes and they were saying volumes before she opened her mouth to speak. Determination, uncertainty, and fear? Yes, just a touch of fear. "Hello, Jim, you're looking well." Silence. "Thank you for seeing me." Silence. "Please, Jim, I'm sorry." Determination, uncertainty, and fear had disappeared. All I could see now was regret. She scooted out of the booth and had started to open the curtain when I spoke. "Janice, please sit back down." I agreed to listen. "You have my undivided attention. Say what you came here to say." She seemed to hesitate for a moment and then came to some kind of a decision. She sat down, took a sip of whatever it was she was drinking, focused her eyes on something over my left shoulder and began speaking. "Jim, the first thing I must do is apologize to you, and I do so now most profusely. I shamelessly betrayed your trust in me. Worse than that, I have never been even remotely honest with you. My behavior toward you, our relationship and our marriage vows have turned into nothing but a lie. I should have told you of my past when we first met. I can only imagine the pain and anguish I have brought to you. For this I am truly sorry. I hope that someday you will be able to forgive me. What I am about to tell you is not offered as an excuse for my actions. There is no excuse, but you do deserve an explanation. What you are about to hear is not designed to create sympathy for me. Nor is it offered in hopes of us getting back together. I realize now that you were fully justified in leaving, and I've accepted that. I have no hope of us ever living together again. Why you deserve someone far better than me." A small tear had made its way halfway down her right cheek. Her voice was quivering and her speech was starting to break. She dug in her handbag for a tissue and dabbed at her eyes. I activated the call switch and had the waiter bring us fresh drinks. This was obviously going to be very difficult for her. So what, she was the one that wanted this meeting. She didn't have to be here. She could suffer through it or she could just leave. I really didn't give a damn which. She took a large drink, shifted her gaze to something over my right shoulder and continued. "Thank you for the drink. I think I'm going to need it and a few more before this is over. You don't have to do this, you know." "Yes, I do. You deserve to hear the truth." "Okay, then, I'm listening." It all started when I was a junior in high school. My stepfather gave me some adult drinks and then you know what? Mom was visiting her sister that night and didn't get home until the next day. I told her what happened, expecting her to throw him out just like she did my father. My father beat and abused her. He started on me when I was 12. She saw the light, called the police, and we never saw him again. She remarried a couple of years later. She explained that my stepdad was very well off financially and it was up to us to take care of him in any way he wanted. After all, he was taking care of us and was even going to pay for my college education. She told me it wouldn't hurt for me to show my appreciation and be nice to him when he wanted me. Although he had been insistent, he had taken his time and tried to make it enjoyable for me. He didn't come to my bed very often, but when he did I accommodated him. I even managed to enjoy his visits as time went on. He was always loving and thoughtful, never hurting me physically. I'm sorry, Janice, I had no idea. Thank you, Jim. Anyhow, I had a teacher take an interest in me during my senior year of high school. He wanted me and I wanted a better grade in algebra. That's the first time I realized I could use my charms, so to speak, to get something I wanted. I was nice to him and my B became an A. We both got what we wanted. I never pursued or came on to any of my college instructors. However, if one suggested he or she wanted to get to know me better, I cooperated. I always made sure I got something in return. I was lucky in that I had some very good teachers in the art of making love. I also learned how to fake pleasure when necessary. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I really didn't care. Considering what my stepdad did to me and my mother's attitude, I accepted things as they were and didn't let it bother me. Again, I'm sorry, Janice. I don't know what to say. Thank you, but you don't need to say anything. I went to work at the bank as a junior loan officer right after I graduated from college. I hadn't been there 2 weeks when a potential investor noticed me while on a tour of the bank. He asked me to have dinner with him, and when I looked at the president for guidance, he just shrugged his shoulders and said the decision was up to me. We went to a very nice restaurant, danced for a while, and then went to his room. The president stopped by my desk a couple of days later and handed me a nice bonus check for helping to get that investor's business. Things just sort of progressed from there. I was made vice president of personnel and public relations 3 years later. It didn't take very long to place 2 or 3 girls in the office where potential investors could see and admire them. The president made it very plain that the decision of whether to have dinner with a potential investor or not was entirely up to them. However, if she helped to convince an investor to do business with us, she got a bonus check a few days later. No questions were ever asked about what they did on their dates. Just out of curiosity, how many times did you F the president or other vice presidents of the bank to secure your position there? Never. One of the girls offered and he said he wasn't about to take a chance of creating problems. So, you and 2 or 3 other women are actually nothing but W for the bank? Yes, that's a crude but accurate way of putting it. They used us, we used them. Everyone benefits. That's a lesson I learned from my mother and stepdad. I learned it very well. Tell me, Janice, what did you want from me? What did I have that you had to have? Considering your salary and bonuses, you made considerable more money. What did you need me for? That's the problem, Jim. All I have ever wanted from you was your love. That's what makes this so difficult. You are the only man I have ever loved. You are the only man I have never used or tried to take advantage of. That's the part that hurts so bad. I ended up hurting you and destroying our marriage and your love by not being honest with you. I should have told you before we were married. I tried to, but I just couldn't make myself do it. I knew you would never understand the lifestyle I led up until I met you. I was extremely selfish and wanted it all. I wanted you. For the first time in my life, I met a man who took me places in bed I had never been to before. I fell deeply in love with you and actually craved having it with you. I really do love you, Jim. The fantastic, you know what was just a beautiful bonus of that love. For what it's worth, what you walked in on that afternoon was the only time I broke our marriage vows. Usually, men being men, they wanted younger women. Things were working out real well for me. Then this one guy asked me out to lunch. I tried to get him interested in one of the younger girls, but it didn't work. His investments were so large and the president wanted his business in the worst way. He strongly insisted that I do whatever was necessary to secure the account. I refused and he became quite upset. He led me into his office and showed me several pictures on his computer. I didn't know the suite had hidden cameras in it. The pictures were of every customer I and the other girls had been with. He pointed out that there were no dates on the pictures and said he would show them to you if I refused. You would be led to believe the pictures were taken after we were married. I didn't want to, but I finally agreed to do what he asked. I just didn't have any other choice. Are you saying that you quit W for the bank when we got married? No. I quit W for the bank the day I met you. What about the other girls, Janice? Are they still WO'ing themselves for the bank? Are you still supervising them, acting as their madam? It's not like that, Jim. It never was. All I ever did was to listen to the girls' gossip during coffee breaks and then moved some of them into the main office where they would have the opportunity to meet potential investors. Any arrangements from that point on were between them and the president. He's the one who made the introductions and he's the one who handed out the bonus checks. Oh, damn. Please, Jim, I don't know what to say or do now. I've made such a mess of my life. I wish I had quit working for that damn bank the same day we met. If I had, we would still be married. I would still have your love. I know it probably doesn't mean anything to you, but I haven't had it since you left. I told the president that since you walked out I no longer had anything to lose. I told him he could take the pictures and stick 'em up his ass for all I cared. I told him if the pictures ever became public I'd go straight to the district attorney and talk my head off. He hasn't had any more requests. All I've done since that day is work, eat, sleep and cry once in a while. Tell me, Jim, is there any way we can get back together anyway at all? I'll quit my job. I'll live with you anywhere you want. I'll do anything you ask, anything. Janice, what you did before we met is of no consequence. I wasn't exactly living a celibate life at that time either. As for now, well, I still love you. I always will. I believe you have been completely honest with me. I believe you only cheated on me that one time. However, I can't get the image of you in bed with him out of my mind. It took a very long time for me to deal with your betrayal, but I have dealt with it. I'm sorry about what happened to you, to us, but I don't know what to do now. I need to think about what you've said. I may, or may not be in touch with you later. I heard a small sob as I left the booth. I wanted to find a private place and cry, myself. I walked over to the bar and sat on a stool beside Bear. I didn't see Janice leave, but I knew when she did. I wanted to chase after her and tell her all was forgiven, but I couldn't make myself do it. At least I somewhat understood her better, now. I could even forgive her at least a little. Somehow, I felt better. Maybe Bear was right, I did need to hear her side of the story. The problem was, what do I do with all this new information? I had spent a year getting past the nightmare of her betrayal. Now she tells me she was coerced. Was she telling me the truth? That remained to be seen. Why didn't she tell me this to begin with? That was a stupid question. I had refused to talk with her. What do I do now? What did I want to do now? Tone of voice and body language are more than 50% of any face-to-face communication. It was obvious to me she needed professional help. She had to have some serious problems with her mother and stepdad. It was their attitude and actions that had shaped her general outlook on life and on men in particular. Her tone of voice and body language screamed for help on that issue. Yet, I'm sure she wasn't consciously aware of it. Somehow, the damn president of the damn bank had to be dealt with. He took things way too far when he threatened blackmail and exposure. Bear had sat there and patiently waited for me to work things out in my mind. I finally looked at him and started talking. I repeated everything Janice had told me, leaving nothing out. Ending my story, I asked Bear what he thought I should do. Only you can answer that question, Jim. I know you still love her. What you have to decide is whether you love her enough to try and make things right between the two of you. You're right, Bear. I'm going to think about it a little more, but I think I'll sit down with her and try to work something out. Thanks for your help, big guy. Catch you later. Take care, Jim. Things were hectic at the office for the next 3 weeks. There was a lot of material to absorb, in detail, but we eventually covered all the essentials. There were drawings, design specifications, time estimates, labor requirements, heavy equipment logistics, material delivery dates, and a week-by-week schedule of what was supposed to happen. A couple of our new hires had been more than a little lax in some areas, and that had to be worked out. One was still on probation and we fired him. The other was severely reprimanded and placed back on probation. Everything had its own set of numbers. Numbers and more numbers. I dreamed about numbers. I was sick of numbers by the time we were through. We finished up Friday at noon. I hitched the camper to the Dodge and pulled into the large parking lot of the bank, blocking several parking places. Janice was talking with the president when I walked into her office. She made a small gasp, putting her hand to her mouth. Being somewhat direct and to the point, I asked, "Do you still want to try to work things out between us?" "Oh, God, yes. Yes, I do. The trailer is hitched and in the parking lot. You've got 5 minutes to decide if you're going with me." Turning and starting back out the door, I heard her say, "I quit." The rapid tapping of her heels on the marble floor as she hurried to catch up with me was almost music to my ears. I had high hopes for us. I really did love her and I wanted her back in my life. We drove until dark, the Dodge eating up the miles, one after the other. We paused at a truck stop long enough for fuel and a couple of cheeseburgers. I was too tired to keep my eyes open by 10 o'clock, so we pulled into a large rest stop. The camper only had one bed, but it was quite large. We didn't even try to make love. I was too exhausted and I think she was too apprehensive. I was asleep within minutes. We woke up about 6 the next morning and got back on the road. The first truck stop we came to was good for breakfast and gas. We arrived at the cabin about noon. Janice was a true city girl. She had never been in the country, much less at a place like this. The rolling hills and valleys fascinated her. The small lake and the cabin with very few conveniences was almost a shock to her. We unhitched the trailer and then drove into town for groceries. Shopping at a small country store that seemed to have a little bit of everything was a pleasant adventure. She was really surprised when we reached the meat department at the back of the store. She didn't have a clue as to what to say when the man asked her what cuts she wanted. She had to go over to his side of the counter and watch as he made cuts on the large hindquarter of a beef. We grabbed a bite to eat at the small country diner. The warm atmosphere and friendly conversation of the place was another shock to her. It was an adventure I'm sure she'll never forget. The drive back to the cabin was fun. We were finally starting to relax and be comfortable with each other. The divorce was final several months ago. That meant our life as a couple had officially ended. I was hoping we could make a fresh start. I was positive she still loved me. Hopefully, I could leave the past in the past and concentrate on the future. Things were looking good so far. After storing the groceries, I suggested a ride in the small rowboat. It took some convincing, but I finally managed to get her seated on the back seat and paddled to the center of one of the small necks in the lake. I picked the fishing pole up and made a long cast toward some cattails and then handed her the pole. She figured out how to turn the crank of the reel and hadn't retrieved the lure 10 feet when there was mass confusion at both ends of the pole. I don't know who was the most surprised, her or the small bass that had struck the lure. There were rapid instructions on my part, excited yelling on her part, and the small bass was going airborne, trying to shake the lure out of his mouth. She finally got it close enough for me to get a net under it and I dumped it right between her feet. The bass started flopping and she started screaming and looking for another part of the boat. For a little bit I thought she was going to tip the boat over. I was absolutely no help at all because I was doubled over with laughter. The bass finally calmed down, she calmed down and I put the fish on a stringer and secured it to a peg on the side of the boat. She stared at me for a few moments, raised the stringer enough to see the fish on the end of it, and then picked the pole up and asked, "How do I get this little thingy on the end of the pole back out there? I want to catch another one." I reached for the pole but she pulled it away, saying, "I want to do it myself." So, with a little coaching on my part, a lot of frustration and a little swearing on her part, and only 2 line tangles, she became a fisherman. Or should that be fisherwoman? The next fish she caught involved just a bit of confusion and a lot of yelling on her part. The scenario changed considerably when the fish came into the boat this time. She patiently waited for me to unhook it and started casting immediately, leaving it to me to get the fish on the stringer and keep the gentle breeze from pushing us into the cattails. I think I created a monster. She fished, I took care of the stringer and paddled the boat. I don't know how many fish she caught, but I saved the 4 largest ones. She didn't want anything to do with the cleaning but headed to the cabin to start peeling potatoes. The conversation during supper kept us both laughing. She talked about the store and the town cafe. Then she had to recount the battle with every fish. We stood side by side and washed the supper dishes. She then turned to me and said, "The only thing left to make this a perfect day is you, in bed with me, now." That statement was followed by a toe-curling kiss. We worked our way to the bed in the corner and managed to get each other's clothes off. She was ready, and I was ready. I had a flashback to the hotel and my feeling of disgust at the time. My proud manhood wilted. I'm not sure what she saw in my eyes, but whatever it was, she couldn't deal with it. Her face contorted and she wailed, "Oh, Jim, I'm so sorry." She rolled over onto her side and started crying. I got up and went out and sat in the porch swing. She wasn't the only one crying. I had to cry too. I wanted tonight to be special for us, a reconciliation so to speak. I wanted to make love to her. The day had been wonderful. I couldn't remember the last time we had so much fun together. She joined me on the swing about an hour later. She kept apologizing and I kept telling her that it wasn't her fault. I blamed it on still being tired from the driving. I blamed it on the stress of the last few weeks at work. I tried to make a joke and blame it on her catching all the fish. That didn't even get a smile. We finally went to bed about midnight. We both tossed and turned, neither one of us able to sleep well. The next few days were pure frustration for both of us. She even tried sneaking up on me. I just couldn't get my to stay long enough to get the job done. We had fun hiking, swimming in the lake, fishing, a trip to town to visit its only antique shop, and just sitting in the swing and watching the sunset. Our only problem was my being unable to maintain you know what at the crucial time. We spent a week at the cabin and then left for the new job site. My first order to Maggie was for her to find us a good marriage counselor. The counselor saw us twice a week for 2 months. We didn't make any progress and he recommended a psychiatrist who specialized in marital problems. She saw us, one-on-one, twice a week for 4 months. She tried everything she could think of to help us. She even tried hypnotic therapy. I was evidently one of those that couldn't be hypnotized. After several attempts, she concluded that the only way I could be put under was with a large hammer. Then she had me try Viagra. That only increased my frustration. At least it wasn't a complete waste of money. She spent a lot of time with Janice talking about the issues she had with her mother and stepfather. I finally gave up and quit going. Janice continued with my blessing to see the good doctor for 3 additional months. Her outlook on life and people in general changed. She got the help she needed to move on in her life and not see others as objects to mistrust and take advantage of. We stayed together and the job was finally finished. Her sister had went back to her husband and had closed the house up. Janice and I spent several days getting the house and yard back into decent shape. Adam and Abby stopped by and invited us to the usual Friday evening get-together. She went to the bank to see about going back to work. The president had moved to another state and was no longer working there. Somehow the chairman had found out about the president's shenanigans and fired him. The hard drive of the computer where the pictures were stored was destroyed and the cameras were removed from the hotel suite. The chairman of the board spent an hour with her and when she left his office, she had her old job back. It was a little tense at the Friday evening get-together, but things started to loosen up when Adam and I had several choice things to say about each other's fishing abilities. Brent even managed to inject a couple of decent thoughts into the argument. We would make a fisherman out of him yet. We left early and walked home holding hands. I mixed 2 drinks and we sat at the kitchen table, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Janice finally took a deep breath and quietly said, "Jim, you have no idea how hard it is for me to say this, but we have to let each other go. Your willingness to try to make things right between us has just made me love you all that much more. You deserve a life with someone you have complete trust in." "No. Don't say anything. Please let me finish. I know we agreed to not talk about past relationships when we got married. I thought that was a good thing, a lucky break for me. The most you could confess to would be a few relationships with girlfriends. I, on the other hand, had been giving potential investors very personal inducements to invest with the bank. To put it bluntly, I sold my body for the benefit of the bank and received some very nice bonus checks for my services. By the time we thought about telling each other about past relationships, I was deeply in love with you. I didn't tell you because I was afraid you would break off our engagement if you were to learn the truth about me. I should have had more faith in you. I realize now that not telling you was a mistake. If I had told you when I should have, the president of the bank would have been unable to manipulate me. It's time for both of us to move on. Please, Jim, find someone special, fall in love with her and have a loving, wonderful life." She lowered her head and sat there, crying softly. I didn't know what to say. There was no doubt of our love for each other, but sometimes love is not enough. We needed the physical intimacy, but my aversion to having with her would probably never go away. It was time for us to move on. Hopefully, she would find someone she could love and be loved by too. She went to bed and I sat there thinking about her little speech. She was right. There was no use in us continuing to torture ourselves. Love without the physical intimacy of a healthy life was a ridiculous situation to remain in. Luckily, there were no children to consider. There was no financial reason to stay together either. So why were we trying so hard? Maybe it was just me that was trying so hard. Maybe she was just trying for my sake, unwilling to quit as long as I was willing to try. I went to the spare bedroom to sleep. There wasn't any reason to prolong the inevitable. If we were going to go our separate ways, now was as good of a time to start as any. The reason to sleep together no longer existed. At least we were parting as friends. The next morning at breakfast, she didn't question my decision to sleep in the spare bedroom. She insisted I stay at the house until I left for the new project in a couple of weeks. Staying here in a large house instead of the small confines of the camper made it easy to agree with her. The new arrangement was easy to get used to. We didn't try to avoid one another, but we didn't pretend to be intimate either. We would discuss what happened at work during supper and sometimes watch a little TV together. It was almost like being brother and sister. Friday evening rolled around and she came into the living room where I was watching the 6 o'clock news and asked if I would like to go to a club with her. "I don't think so," I mumbled. "Besides, I wouldn't want to scare anyone off that might ask you to dance." "Oh, come on. Don't be such a stick in the mud. It'll do us both good to have a couple of drinks and let off a little steam." "Okay, what's the dress code for this place you want to go to?" "Dress shirt and sport coat, tie is optional." "What? No pants? What kind of a place are we going to?" I asked, chuckling. "Oh, don't be silly. Now go change." Blue jeans are definitely a no-no. She laughed. The club was larger than it first appeared. There were about 30 booths and twice that many tables scattered around the perimeter of the dance floor. The dance floor was probably 75 by 100 feet and well polished. A 5-piece band was setting up on the small elevated stage at the far end of the room. The place was only about half full but filling up fast. It was my guess that this place was popular with the 25 to 40-year-old crowd. It was obvious that more than half of the patrons were married couples. They were the ones sitting in the well-lighted booths and at the tables closest to the dance floor. The couples sitting in the booths in the darker corners were probably married too, just not to each other. There seemed to be a good sprinkling of singles, male and female, scattered throughout the place as well. We managed to capture a booth centrally located along the wall. The band was playing a fast number by the time our drinks arrived. I handed the waitress a 50 and told her to keep fresh drinks on the table. The next number was a slow one and Janice grabbed my hand and led me to the middle of the floor, telling me the first dance was for old time's sake. I was somewhat taken aback. I had no idea what she meant by that remark. The next number was another fast one, so we returned to our booth. We hadn't any more than sat down when a neatly dressed guy came over and asked if it would be alright if he asked Janice to dance. At least he had good manners to go with his good looks. She looked questionably at me and I nodded okay. She killed her drink and headed to the floor with him. She stayed on the floor with him for the next 3 fast numbers. I didn't pay too much attention to her and started checking out the single women. A slow number started, so I finished my drink and asked a pretty girl standing next to the bar for a dance. She never hesitated, taking my hand and leading me to the floor. We danced the next 2 fast numbers as well. Janice was sitting down at the booth just as I got there. She picked up her drink and killed it. "Having fun?" I asked. "Oh yes. Thanks for Brie." She didn't get to finish. Mr. Nice Guy took her by the arm and off to the floor they went. I didn't object. I killed my drink and sat there contemplating which girl to dance with next. The waitress was sliding 2 fresh drinks on the table as I got up to ask another girl to dance. That's the way it went for the next 3 hours. I left 2 more 50s on the table to ensure good service and continued to see how many different girls I could dance with. Janice and I met at the table a half a dozen times and there were always fresh drinks waiting for us. I managed to dance with 8 or 10 different partners, some of them more than once. One good-looking little gal completely pasted herself to me during the slow numbers. The alcohol was starting to affect me and I decided to sit for a little bit. I looked around for Janice and finally saw her dancing a fast number with Mr. Nice Guy again. I know she danced with several guys, but she seemed to be giving this guy more than his share of attention. Something had happened to her skirt. It was a knee-length pleated full skirt when we left home, but it only came halfway to her knees now. She must have rolled it up at the waist. She spun at that moment and I could plainly see the bare cheeks. What in the hell happened to her underwear? She shook her shoulders and I could see she had her red bra on too. What in the hell did she think she was doing advertising herself that way? Thankfully, the band started playing a slow number. I would certainly have a talk with her when she got back to the table. I gunned my drink down and another appeared as if by magic. There were over a dozen empty glasses on the table by now. You would think the help here would at least keep the tables cleaned off. She didn't come back to the table. She just plastered herself to Mr. and stayed out there on the floor making a spectacle of herself. The son of a bee was squeezing her with one hand. She had her arms locked firmly around his neck. This was starting to piss me off. How in the hell could she behave this way? She came here with me, damn it. The next thing I knew, they were lip-locked. Now I was really mad. I knew I had no right to be, but I was. We decided a week ago that we were no longer a couple. We were supposed to be parting as friends and each of us would go our separate way. So what? At this point I really didn't give a s about that. She was out there behaving like a s and I wasn't about to put up with it. The band played another slow number and they continued to stay out there in the middle of the floor. By now I was about as mad as I can ever remember being. The longer they danced, if that's what they were doing, the madder I got. Finally, the damn song ended. He headed off in the direction of the restroom and she just came to our booth, took a swig of her drink and then picked up her purse. "If you don't mind, I'm going to another club with Roger." She slurred. So, Roger was Mr. Nice Guy, a whole name. What in the hell did she mean, if I didn't mind? Of course I minded. "Janice, you've had too much to drink." I slurred right back. I ran my hand up under her dress and said, "My God." She finished her drink, looked squarely into my eyes and arrogantly said, "So? I'm horny." "So what? And for your information, I've had just the right amount to drink. Besides, what's it to you anyway? It's not like we're married anymore. You're the one who insisted on the divorce, remember? You're the one who can't. Do you know what? I'll bet Roger won't have that problem." She turned on her heel and started walking unsteadily toward the door. Damn her. Damn her to hell. She had no right to say that. She had no right to talk to me that way. I slid out of the booth and caught up with her about halfway to the door. I grabbed her hand and dragged her right on out the door. Jim, what in the hell do you think you're doing? Let go of me, damn it. I'm supposed to meet Roger at the door. Roger Smodger would just have to F himself tonight. He damn sure wasn't going to be F what was mine. She tried to stop. That just made me madder. How dare she defy me? She whacked me upside the head with her purse. Ouch. That hurt? Damn it. I said to let me go. You don't own me anymore. Now turn me loose. Shut up, Janice. Heck you. Turn me loose, right now. She kicked me on the shin and managed to break my grip on her hand. I spun around, grabbed her around the waist and threw her over my shoulder. I carried her the rest of the way to the truck while she screamed, kicked, and beat on my back with her fist. I opened the door of the truck and flopped her on the seat. Stay. Ich screamte hier. I got behind the wheel and left the parking lot, tires squealing in protest. The tires weren't all that were squealing in protest. Janice was at full throttle and telling me in no uncertain terms exactly how she felt about me. Jim, for God's sake, slow down. You just ran a stop sign. Just shut the F up, Janice. Besides, there wasn't anyone coming. I managed to skid to a stop before I crashed through the garage door. I opened her door and throwing her over my shoulder again, headed for the front door. At least she wasn't kicking and screaming at me now. I managed to get the door unlocked, kicked it closed behind us and headed to the bedroom. I let her drop from my shoulder onto the center of the bed. She just laid there, arrogantly looking at me. You surely don't think you're going to F me, do you? That's a joke. But go ahead, take your best shot, sweetie. Hell, I'm safe. Come on, stud, show me what a man you are. I was beyond mad now. The anger welled up in me. Way to go, stud. You found it. Now what are you going to do about it? Well, what are you waiting for? Come on. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Her arrogance was bad enough. She was belittling me now. By God, I'd show her. She screamed, not in pain. Falling off to the side, I lay there panting, exhausted, deeply ashamed of how I had treated her. Janice, I'm sorry. I had no right to treat you like that. Please forgive me? I don't know what came over me. Hey there, caveman, wanna do it again? I looked at her, confused, uncertain. She rolled over on top of me and locked her mouth to mine. Make love with me, honey. Take me places where only you can. She whispered. We worshipped at the throne of the deity of love for over an hour before drifting off to sleep in each other's arms.